Thanks for starting your week with us. Hello and welcome to Business Daily. I'm Lee Ji-yoon in Seoul. We have plenty on our plate today, so let's get started with a look at the day's highlights. The government is planning to support the country's struggling shipbuilding and shipping industries, promising to pump in billions of dollars by 2020. With the growing number of Koreans directly buying from e-commerce websites overseas, Korea's Fair Trade Commission unveils new guidelines to address the increasing number of complaints. These stories and more coming right up. The government has rolled out plans to help Korea's cash-strapped shipbuilding and shipping industries by injecting billions of dollars into the sector. Now, the move comes on the back of the recent collapse of Hanjin Shipping, which applied for a court receivership at the end of August, and massive layoffs from shipyards. Our Shin Se-min starts us off.
The Korean government says it'll pump in 11 trillion won, or $9.5 billion into the country's ailing shipbuilding industry by 2020.
As a short-term measure, the government will help local firms cope with falling global demand by getting them orders of more than 250 vessels by the end of the decade.
This drive is focused on upgrading the competitiveness and profitability of the sector, which has seen orders slump 87% on year in the first 9 months of this year. Officials also announced measures to alleviate problems in the failing shipping industries, crippled by slowing global trade and overcapacity, with one of the country's largest cargo carriers, Hanjin Shipping, filing for court receivership in August. The government said it'll create a financing company with initial capital over $870 million to help shippers buy vessels. The government has also vowed to provide financial support worth $5.6 billion to help shipping industries turn their focus to high value-added services and enhance efficiency. This all comes at a time when both the shipping and shipbuilding industries are going through major restructuring efforts to address their sagging competitiveness. Massive layoffs have been seen at shipyards so far this year. The government says the three largest firms will cut 32% of their direct workforce and scale back operations by 23% by 2018. This has prompted the government to announce plans to support regions heavily reliant on shipyards with funds worth $1.4 billion by next year. Experts say these measures come at a time of great need.
Considering that the local shipbuilders and shippers missed their timing to implement fresh measures for industrial competitiveness after being faced with Chinese rivals and global oversupply, the necessity for such measures was overwhelming.
Experts add that such efforts will be an investment down the line as the country's shipbuilding and shipping industries will likely be able to gain growth momentum through these efforts, including the ongoing corporate restructuring and plans for structural reforms. Shin Se-min, Business Daily.
Consumption here in Korea hit a 5-year low in September. According to Statistics Korea, retail sales dropped by 4.5% from the month before, logging the biggest slide since February 2011. Spending dropped in non-durables such as food and clothing, but durable goods in particular dropped by 6.1%, reflecting the shock in the electronic devices market after the Samsung Galaxy Note 7 recall. Production across all industries, including the service sector, fell by 0.8%, marking the first negative growth in 5 months. Industrial output in mining and manufacturing inched up 0.3% on month, but much of this was attributed to the surge in automobiles due to the base effect from the protracted strike. Compared to the same time last year, car production nosedived over 14%. Business leaders from Korea and Cuba met to explore possibilities for economic cooperation in the first diplomatic exchange between the two countries in 57 years. The Korea-Cuba Economic Cooperation Committee meeting was held in Havana on Sunday, and the meeting brought together representatives from more than 70 Cuban companies, Korean corporations, including Samsung Electronics, the Federation of Korean Industries, and the Korea Trade Investment Promotion Agency. Participants discussed business opportunities in fields including electronics, energy, and biomedical sector. The KOSPI fell 5 notches to 15th place as of Friday, amid strong gains made by key stock indexes of G20 countries. Korea's benchmark had ranked 10th in profitability in the January through June period. But according to Daishin Securities and other industry sources, the KOSPI on the 28th was up 2.5% from the end of June, underperforming its G20 peers, which clocked in an average growth of 6.7%. The relatively modest gain comes as Korea's main index has been under pressure, both from variables on the domestic and global fronts. Large cap firms Samsung Electronics and Hyundai Motor both registered lackluster third quarter earnings last week, while a looming Fed rate hike in a U.S. presidential election could keep investors away. The Korean equity market fell sharply in the first session of the week, and starting last week, we've been seeing small and mid-cap stocks perform relatively weaker than large caps. For more on what to expect this week, we're now joined by our markets contributor, Choi Jin-seok. Hello, Jin-seok.
Great to be here.
All right, so first off, how did the Korean stock market close on the first day of this week?
First of all, the KOSPI market fell by 0.56% to close at 2008.19, while the Kosdaq plummeted by 2.42%. Despite the National Pension Service's plan to invest 1 trillion Korean won on the Kosdaq, sentiment among investors was extremely weak throughout the session. On the KOSPI market, both retail investors and foreigners unloaded shares during the session, while foreigners shifted their position to buy in late hours. As investors are in a wait-and-see mode ahead of major central bank meetings, the ongoing Choi scandal continued to spook the market sentiment. NH Investment and Securities warned the impact of political risks can be greater than expected, citing the past example of the National Assembly attempting to impeach former President Roh Moo-hyun. Back then, the KOSPI plummeted 10% within a week.
Wow. Well, as we talked about last week as well, large cap stocks continue to outperform small and medium cap stocks, and as we have seen today even. And also the Kosdaq fell below 630 for the first time since February. Why?
Weak performance on the Kosdaq and among small and mid-cap stocks is a clear sign of market uncertainty. Investors are now turning their eyes to large-cap value stocks because they're unsure about future market directions ahead of central bank meetings this week and a potential Fed rate hike in December. On top of that, better global economic indicators and rebounding oil prices have helped lift earnings expectations for large companies. Second, the biotechnology sector has been underperforming globally. In the U.S., the Nasdaq Healthcare Index sank by 3.3% last week. Sluggish earnings reported by domestic companies, including Hanmi Pharmaceuticals and Green Cross, hurt investor sentiment in the sector as well. On the Kosdaq, healthcare shares account for 18% of the market.
And as you said, we have some major central bank meetings this week, and all the economic indicators are queued up as well. So what are some of the market events that investors should take a closer look at this week?
Of course, the U.S. FOMC meeting is drawing a lot of attention from the investors. And before that, PCE index as well as ISM manufacturing data will give hints about economic conditions in the U.S. Since there's no press conference at the November FOMC, investors will only see the statement released early Thursday morning Korea time. We also have policy meetings from the UK and Japan, and those meetings can have an impact, especially on the foreign exchange market. After those meetings, the U.S. employment report will be released this Friday. Economists expect around 175,000 jobs were created last month, and another decent job gains can give the Fed confidence to raise interest rates in December.
And the Q3 U.S. earnings season continues as well. So what companies are drawing attention this week?
Big companies including Facebook, Qualcomm, Alibaba, and Pfizer will disclose their quarterly earnings this week. So far, the earnings season has been a positive catalyst to global financial markets. With 58% of S&P 500 companies reporting earnings, 74% have reported earnings above the mean estimate, and 58% have reported sales above the mean estimate. The blended earnings growth rate for the S&P 500 500 is 1.6%. And if the index reports growth in earnings for the quarter, it will mark the first time the index has seen year-over-year growth in earnings since Q1 2015.
And of course, lastly, we can't overlook the importance of a U.S. presidential election, which is fastly approaching. So how are the latest developments affecting the market?
To start off with, the U.S. stock market ended a volatile session with modest losses on Friday, pressured by the surprise announcement that the FBI was restarting a probe into Hillary Clinton's emails, adding fresh political uncertainty to the market. MarketWatch reported Asian markets performed weak today due to renewed worries about the U.S. election. And there are two things investors should focus on. First, global financial markets do not want Donald Trump to be elected. So any news that adds ground to restarting the investigation against Clinton can spook market sentiment. Second, predictions for Clinton's victory can have a negative effect on the biotechnology sector. The U.S. Nasdaq Biotechnology Index is down more than 8% in October and 21% so far this year, because Clinton said she wants to lower prices of drugs once she gets elected. So we'll still need to watch further developments on the election front as they come to light this week.
All right. Thank you so much for coming in today.
Thank you.
Korea's welfare spending has been ranked one of the lowest among OECD member countries this year. According to the organization's database, the country's social expenditure took up an estimated 10.4% of its GDP, placing 34th, or the second lowest in the group, just ahead of Mexico. Despite Korea's efforts to increase spending on welfare each year, figures show it still falls far behind that of other developed countries. France topped the list, pouring in 31% of its GDP, followed by Finland and Belgium. Korea is set to spend a total of roughly $113 billion on social welfare next year, accounting for about 32.4% of its planned budget. Buying overseas products directly through the internet has been on a consistent climb, and so has the number of complaints filed by consumers. And our news Kim tells us more about the rising trend and a set of measures that the Fair Trade Commission hopes will help resolve some of the problems.
With the wonder of the internet, Koreans have gone closer to the source to buy everything from TVs to designer bags. In fact, the number of orders made directly from overseas sources reached more than 23 million last year, marking a 260% growth over 5 years and worth an estimated $1.5 billion. To keep up, Korea Customs Service opened a state-of-the-art distribution center in June. Its automation technology processes 30,000 packages per hour, 10 times more than what it used to be. But with the higher traffic in, there are also more complaints out. Data from the Fair Trade Commission shows that delivery topped the list of complaints, with more than 1,600 filed last year, followed by issues related to refunds and the purchased products. And with resolution of those complaints remaining in the 40% range, there is a call for regulators to do more.
Korea Consumer Agency must be more proactive in alerting people in order to stop the damage from spreading. We also need relevant laws to deal with losses.
Last week, the Fair Trade Commission unveiled new guidelines to institute a process for the several streams of overseas direct shopping available. For the most common, domestic online shopping malls that ink special deals with overseas brands, the onus is on them to verify that the goods received meet quality standards before they are shipped to customers in Korea. The companies delivering the goods must inform customers where their package is as it's en route. Finally, customers must notify delivery companies of any problems they may have within a period of 10 days. Eunice Kim, Business Daily.
Today's the last day of October, and that means it won't be long until families get together to make kimchi, or Korea's pickled cabbage dish. Known as kimjang, the making of kimchi usually takes place in the month of November. But according to a survey on over 1,000 people, almost half say they won't be making their own kimchi this year. Our Lee Ju-young tells us why.
Kimchi making, or kimjang, has long been considered an important family ritual for Koreans as they prepare for the long winter. But this year, many families have decided not to keep up with traditions, facing skyrocketing vegetable prices in the aftermath of a sweltering heat wave this summer.
They are a lot pricier than before, so I'm worried about kimjang this fall.
According to Korea Agro-Fisheries and Food Trade Corporation, the average price of Napa cabbages was about $4 a head. Prices have stabilized somewhat, considering a head cost $9 in mid-September, but current levels are still about 65% higher than last year. The costs of other key ingredients like white radishes and chives have also shot up to $3 and $5 respectively.
The price of key ingredients has jumped over 1.5-fold. The cost of kimjang will likely surge by over 20%.
That means making about 20 heads of kimchi will likely cost a household about $440 to $530 on average, in stark contrast with the previous $260 level. Experts say the rising price of kimjang is likely to push up imports of kimchi even further as an increasing number of Koreans turn to cheaper kimchi made in China. Lee Ju-young, Business Daily.
And that wraps it up for today. Thanks for watching. We'll be back tomorrow with more at the same time, same place for your Business Daily. Until then, goodbye.